would you feel if you unknowingly married your half-sibling? Imagine that as you get older, you become aware of a genetic disorder that you have, but it doesn't come from your mother or your father. And then you find out that you were conceived by donor sperm or a donor egg. And this makes you question everything, your whole life, where you come from, what your ethnic background is, and whether or not you have half-siblings. So then you realize you will most likely never find the answers to those questions because you are not entitled to half of those answers, which are from half of your genetic makeup. Well, why is that possible? According to a BioNews article by Wendy Kramer and Professor Comm, only the state of Washington has passed a law which allows donor-conceived offspring to get the answers to those questions. When they turn 18, they can contact the clinic and get the medical history of their donor. The issue of the lack of federal oversight on assisted reproductive technology treats human life like a contract. How is it acceptable not to provide adults the answers to their conception when it could affect them physically, mentally, and generations to come? So not only have I done my research, but I was also once an egg donor. I have personally been affected by the exploitation of this industry. Today, we are going to discuss the problem, the effects of this problem, and possible solutions. So the problem with the absence of federal oversight in this industry is that it has created a gray area, which has allowed donors, donor-conceived offspring, and their families to be exploited. Intended parents are not being provided the knowledge they are entitled to. Most of the time, the donor doesn't even get to choose if they are anonymous. It's typically up to the couple that receives the gametes, the sperm or the egg, if they want the relationship to be open or closed. In my situation, I wasn't given a choice. My donation was anonymous. And it wasn't a problem until I got older and I had my own children. And then we found out that my son had autism. And I thought this was something that the people that have my eggs would want to be aware of. So I contacted the clinic, and they told me that they weren't legally bound to relay that information. Ethically, yes. Legally, no. So even though the intended parents are expecting my eggs to be perfect and healthy, they may not find out until it's too late that they carry a heightened risk of having a child with autism. Donor offspring may never know the truth of their conception, which dawns the risk of accidental incest. Some countries have passed legislation to prevent this from happening. According to Naomi Kahn, a professor at George Washington University Law School, the Netherlands restricts the number of children from any individual donor to 25. England and Australia, no more than 10 families can use the same donor, but it doesn't limit the number of children they're allowed to have. So in this film, Delivery Man, Vince Vaughn was a sperm donor, which results in over 500 children. And you're probably asking me, well, that's not possible. Well, you might be surprised to learn that the United States has no such limitation on the number of offspring born to one single donor. So that has led to hundreds of half-siblings from one donor. Numerous news anchors have covered one particular case of one such donor's exploitation. Per the Huffington Post and ABC News, Kirk Maxey donated for 16 years, and he expected the sperm bank to distribute his donations accordingly. However, this has led to approximately 400 donor-conceived offspring, and we can't know the exact number because the sperm banks aren't legally bound to keep track. So, Kirk Maxey, now having a son of his own, has quoted saying, "I thought the doctors were keeping track of each birth, but then when I realized that they weren't, I began to worry. What if my son starts dating one of his half-siblings?" So now that you're aware of some of the problems associated with the lax regulations of the assisted reproductive technology industry, let me tell you about the effects that this issue has on offspring. Not knowing one's genetic roots prevents knowing one's sense of true identity. According to Paul Brzezina and Yulian Zhao, experts from Johns Hopkins Medical Institute, the ability of human beings to know their genetic roots is universally important at the core of self-identity. So not only does having that knowledge of your genetic makeup allow one to find their sense of self, it also helps them in cases of medical necessity. Advocates for providing information about the donor's identity have argued the medical treatment and other health-related concerns may depend on knowing one's genetic heritage. Donor anonymity aids in the non-disclosure of genetic disorders. Little medical testing is being done to find out before they do a donation what they carry. So as was the case with Kirk Maxey, the one that has approximately 400 offspring, if he had a genetic disorder, they wouldn't even be able to know until it was too late, when hundreds of offspring have that same disorder. So now that I've discussed just a few of the effects that occur from the lack of federal regulation of assisted reproductive technology, let's discuss possible solutions. Federal oversight and regulations of the art industry will safeguard against exploitation of the donor and donor-conceived families. Donor anonymity needs to be abolished. Donor offspring have a right to know their origins whenever they reach the age of 18. Fertility clinics should be legally bound to relay any changes to medical records and also changes in life. Reproductive clinics and sperm banks should not be allowed to destroy records. They must maintain comprehensive, up-to-date medical histories. Federal regulation should be passed to limit the number of offspring per a single donor. In countries that have passed this legislation, it is working. Through this speech, I have highlighted the problems that surround the unregulated, multi-billion-dollar art industry. I have discussed the effects this has on the donors and their families, on the human beings that are being created. Now, and presented you with possible solutions. Creating life is a beautiful thing, whether that be from a test tube or the old-fashioned way. But we must ask ourselves, what is best for the humans that we are creating? In a study conducted by Wendy Kramer and Dr. Vasanti Jadva, 751 donor-conceived offspring participated. Out of that, 82% indicated a desire to know their donor someday. And one of the top reasons to know their donor was because they wanted to understand why I am who I am. No one should be left wondering why they are who they are.